At a class reunion, I ran into my ex-boyfriend who had been broken up for 3 years. Just entering the door, I found him surrounded by a group of old classmates. He was holding a young and beautiful girl in his arms. The students were wishing him a happy wedding. I suddenly had a hard time in my heart. It turns out that 3 years after the breakup, he was already married. I'm the only one still holding on to the memories. My mom smiled and reminded me, "Be safe when you go out with Jackson later. You can play outside a little longer after the party. No need to rush home. Tonight is my college reunion." I had planned to go by myself, but my mom insisted Jackson to drive me. Seeing my reluctant face, my mom poked me in the head and said, "Why are you so reluctant to go out with Jackson? Jackson is a local. He treats you well. Why don't you like him? And he has a good job. He's handsome too, no worse than Oliver. What's so good about him? What's so good about him that you can't forget him?" I hurriedly called out to my mom. I interrupted my mom. 4 years have passed. I didn't expect to hear that name. It's still hard to hear. Even breathing became difficult. I sniffled, said to my mom, "Mom, don't worry about me. I told you a long time ago. Jackson only sees me as a sister. He likes someone else. He went out of town to work. It's also for that girl." I tried to calm the discomfort in my heart, grabbed my bag, and quickly headed out the door. The car drove fast. Jackson sent me straight to the door of the box. He saw that I was depressed. He reached out and gently scratched my nose. "What happened? You're in a bad mood. Are you in trouble with your mom again?" I pushed his hand away. I sighed and said, "It's okay. My mom is always like this. I'm used to it. Maybe I just seemed too calm." Jackson was deliberately trying to tease me. He bent down. Hot breath sprayed on my ear. "Why do you look like a little adult? Do you want me to cancel tonight's blind date? I'll stay with you." My ears were tingling. I moved to the side. I pushed him with my hand. "You go away. I'm fine now." Jackson immediately covered his shoulders, pretending to say, "You are so cruel. My shoulder hurts. Last month, I got into a car accident while driving to work with Jackson. He was protecting me. He hurt his shoulder." Hearing him talk about it, I was worried that his injury hadn't healed. Rushed over to lift his shirt to check. He followed and bent down to match me. I undid his collar, checked it carefully. Luckily, there was nothing serious. I breathed a sigh of relief, helped him straighten his collar. The door to the box opened. I caught a glimpse of Oliver in the crowd. He was surrounded by everyone. He was surrounded by everyone. His legs crossed. He was surrounded by everyone. His legs crossed, and his straight calves hanging naturally on the floor. The backrest of the sofa was decorated with pure white and delicate ornaments like a crown. It makes him look like a noble prince. My heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Reason instantly collapsed. Almost couldn't help but rush up, if it wasn't for the sudden appearance of a girl beside him. He was hugging a beautiful young girl. The two appeared to be very close. Classmates were wishing him a happy wedding. I felt a sudden pang in my heart. It turned out that we had broken up for 3 years. He is already married. But the one who has not been able to let go of this memory, it's only me. Emily asked me, "Are you stupid?" I suddenly came back to my senses. I almost didn't stand still. Jackson smiled and held my waist, helping me stand up straight. I don't know what's wrong with him today. First, he glanced meaningfully toward the box, then pressed his whole body against my back, said through clenched teeth, "I'm still here. You are lost in thought. Is it by which man is fascinated? The voice is not too loud and not too small. Just enough so that the whole box can hear." The hot, wet breath sprayed on my neck. I shrunk my neck uncomfortably. I was about to push him away. Suddenly, I noticed a cold gaze cast over. I instinctively looked at Oliver, who was not far away. Our gazes collided. 4 years ago, if Oliver had seen this situation, Oliver would have had a scowl on his face and wrapped me in a tight embrace, telling people I was his. And then he'd be pouting, begging me not to leave. But not now. He just gave me a little look and turned his head away, talking to someone else as usual, looking at his side face. I feel empty inside. These 4 years, I always thought about us meeting again, but it never occurred to me that he was married. There was a hard feeling in my heart. I couldn't help but take a step back. Before I agreed to come to the class reunion, it was because I wanted to see him. Now he's married. My presence seemed awkward. I wanted to go over and question her, why she didn't wait for me. But I realize I don't have the right, because I left him first. And the way we broke up was very dishonorable. He's such a strong man. Back then, he put down his pride and begged me to come back. But I still do not have the courage to see him. I pursed my lips, took a step back. Since this is the case, there's no need for me to go in. Was about to turn around. The back was suddenly pushed against. Jackson's voice was heard in my ear. "We're already here. Why don't you go in?" I was pushed in. I was sitting across from Oliver. Jackson sat next to me. The atmosphere became awkward all of a sudden. After all, everyone knew about my previous relationship with Oliver. It was a big deal. Luckily, the class president came out in time to ease the situation. Only then did the atmosphere come back to life. Who hasn't fallen in love a few times when they were young? Now we've been in society for a few years. We've long since looked down on these emotional matters, but being in the middle of it, I still feel a bit awkward. Especially Jackson. I don't know what happened today. I don't know what's wrong with him today. He's like a different person. He's not pouring water for me. She's like a different person today, either pouring me water or giving me food. The girl across the street told Oliver to eat the shrimp in a dainty voice, and he reminds me to eat more. I can't help it. Leaning close to his ear and whispering, I ask, "Aren't you going on a blind date today? Why don't you go yet?" Jackson looks at me with a raised eyebrow. "Your ex-boyfriend is here. Of course I have to support you. How can I leave? Besides, your mom told me to take care of you." I sighed softly. I just sat up straight. I felt a cold gaze. I looked up. Oliver was looking at me with a smile on his face, seeing me looking at him as well. He immediately turned his head away. I lowered my head, trying to suppress the growing sourness in my heart. When the party ended, I went to the bathroom, thinking about the intimate scene between Oliver and that girl in the box. I couldn't help but shed tears, letting the tears slide down. When I came out, just in time to see Oliver and Jackson talking in the aisle. I don't know if I'm looking at it wrong. When Oliver saw my red eyes, he seemed to freeze for a moment, but he quickly averted his gaze, continuing to talk to Jackson. They seemed to be discussing something at work. The whole time he never looked at me again. I clenched my fists, trying to swallow the bitterness in my heart. "That's it then. I'll see you at the office some other time," Oliver said. Jackson responds calmly. "Okay, I should get back with Emily too." Oliver's cold voice rings in his ear. "Jackson, oh, what's so urgent?" Jackson turned his head sideways, blinks quickly at me. Then eyes go back to Oliver. "It's not a big deal. It's just that Emily's mom made a midnight snack, asked us to come back for it." He smiled, meaningfully. And again, my shoulder still hurts a bit. Gotta let Emily take a look at it for me, taking off my clothes in front of outsiders. I'm kinda embarrassed. He purposely aggravated the tone of the words undress. Oliver heard this sentence. He froze for a moment. I thought he would say something. In the end, he didn't say a word. He turned around and left. It was a clean break. I was frozen in place. My whole body froze. I didn't want to admit it, but the truth was in front of me. I had to admit it. Oliver seemed to have really let go of the past. He doesn't care about me anymore. "Emily, it's okay. It's okay." I wiped the corners of my eyes, pretending not to care. Suddenly, a handkerchief was handed to me. Jackson's hoarse voice came, "Silly girl, don't try to be brave in front of me." I raised my head, right into his dark eyes. There was an emotion in them that I couldn't understand. He quietly gazed at me for a moment, then he sighed softly. "Emily, 4 years have passed. You still haven't forgotten him." I wiped my tears with a tissue, directly said, "I can't let go. I can't forget him." Jackson paused for a moment. Smiling, he said to me, "How come I didn't realize that you are so sentimental? In the past, you secretly liked me. You even confessed to me. How come I haven't seen you being so devoted to me?" He suddenly mentioned this embarrassing matter. I was a bit helpless. I was still young at that time. "And didn't you also say you have a favorite schoolmate? It's impossible to accept me." Jackson smiled slightly. Didn't say anything. The atmosphere was a bit stiff for a while. I hurriedly urged Jackson to go. Jackson dropped me off in front of the house. I didn't let him go. Took him straight upstairs. Examined his shoulder carefully. After confirming that there was no problem, before sending him out the door, I've been in a bad mood. When Jackson drove away, suddenly said to me, "I've asked around for you. He's still alone." Jackson patted my shoulder. The tone of his voice was filled with helplessness. "Recently, our two companies are working together. Coincidentally." I froze for a moment, a bit in disbelief. Really, Jackson thought about it, cocked his head. "It could be. I heard it from their employees." Jackson was always popular with the girls. He'd heard it from the women. Oliver suddenly shifted his focus to Chicago 2 months ago. He seems to be planning to stay here for a long time. And I haven't heard anything about the boss getting married. My chest still feels clogged. I know Oliver's personality, and he doesn't like to be superficial. If there's nothing between him and that girl, If he really had nothing to do with that girl, he would have explained it right away. Jackson looked at me. He didn't say anything. After a while, he said softly, "Maybe it's just an engagement now." Back home, my mom came right over to greet me. She asked me in a roundabout way, "How was the reunion today? How did you get along with Jackson?" I leaned back on the couch tiredly, listening to her chattering in my ear. Actually, my mom didn't used to be like this. Ever since my dad's business failed, after taking the family's money and secretary away, she became like this. My grandparents died early. My mom grew up living in other people's homes. The character is especially sensitive. Then she met my dad. Only then did she gradually get rid of the shadow of the past. After getting married, she and my dad started a business together, taking care of the family wholeheartedly. One day, the company suddenly went bankrupt. My dad left my mom for a young girl. My mom couldn't take the shock. She had an emotional breakdown. After the divorce, she put all her thoughts on me, took me as the whole of her life. She was worried that her only daughter would leave like the man who betrayed her. So she both loved me and bound me. Since I was a child, I never left Chicago during that time. It was a time of great psychological stress for both mother and daughter. That's when Jackson came into my life. He helped my mom find a therapist. He also helped my mom find a therapist, and he often talked to me. Because of him, my life slowly became brighter, so I relied on him and fell in love with him. It's only natural. When I graduated from high school, I stopped him in front of his house, confessed with a red face. He looked at me in silence. His eyes were full of complicated emotions. After a while, he whispered, "Emily, I'm sorry. I only thought of you as a sister." Jackson has always lived a spontaneous life. He never cared what others thought. If he says he doesn't like me, I'm sure he doesn't like me. Then he told me he has a favorite girl. She's a former senior at our school. She's graduated now. He plans to follow in her footsteps, to live in another city. Sure enough, it didn't take long. Jackson left. His departure disheartened me. It also made me more tired of this city. So I hid it from my mom. I secretly changed my choice. I went to New York. That's where I met Oliver. He got good grades. He had good grades, good looks, and a lot of energy. He was the star of the campus. He was the biggest star on campus at that time. A lot of girls at school were in love with him. I was no exception, although I had been living in the shadows. So when Oliver confessed to me, I accepted him without hesitation. After being with Oliver, it felt like even the air became sweet. He not only took good care of me in life, he also gave me a lot of psychological support. We are like a normal couple. We take elective courses together when we have time, watching movies, climbing mountains, occasionally kissing downstairs. We were in the middle of something sweet. Jackson came to visit me at school with something. As soon as Oliver saw Jackson, immediately got nervous. After Jackson left, he tentatively asked me who Jackson was. I said bluntly, "He was my senior in high school. He was very nice to me, like a real brother." That's not a lie. After being with Oliver, I realized my feelings for Jackson weren't love. It's just a sister's dependence on her brother. Oliver believed in me at that time, but as soon as Jackson approached me, he was nervous, displeasure written all over his face. Think about it. If Oliver had a close female classmate, I'd be uncomfortable too. Later, I stopped hanging out with Jackson. I especially liked Oliver. I also fell in love with New York, which has 4 seasons like spring. So in my senior year, Oliver and I agreed to go to New York together after graduation. After graduation, we'd go to New York to work together. Then we'd get married. I didn't expect that right after graduation. There was an accident at home. A neighbor called to tell me my mom had a car accident. At that time, Oliver was out of town on an internship. I sent him a message. I rushed home. When I got home, my mom locked me in the house. She took my cell phone. Her hair was a mess, like crazy. She scolded me for being as heartless as my dad, leaving her behind. I explained to her. She wouldn't listen. She hated me. And she hated Oliver, thought he took her daughter. "Emily, Oliver's a terrible person. He just wants to take you away from me." I explained it to my mom, but she was obsessed. She wouldn't listen to anything. She even used my cell phone to send Oliver a breakup text. "You think I really like you? You were just the flavor of my college years." My favorite is Jackson's brother. If you don't believe me, go ask. I've loved him since high school, and your mom's not right. She remarried you to your current stepfather. I don't want to marry into a family like yours. When I realized all this, my heart went cold, thinking that Oliver must hate me very much. But unexpectedly, Oliver came to me the next day. His hair was a mess. His eyes were red. He begged me to give him another chance. Usually such a proud man, he was forced by my mom to lower his head. Even so, he hasn't given up on me. He still begged me in a low voice to get back together. I feel so bad in my heart. I wanted to go downstairs to look for him, but my mom locked me in the house. Even the windows were sealed shut. I finally escaped. I wanted to go to him to explain, but my mom opened the gas tank without saying a word. I froze at once. I didn't dare to go any further, no matter how much I loved Oliver. I couldn't stand by and watch my mom get into trouble. Later, I heard from a neighbor. Half a year ago, my dad came back with that woman. They laughed at my mom for being alone. My mom couldn't handle it for a while. She got depressed again. The doctor said she can't be stimulated again in the short term. Otherwise, the consequences will be serious. I was going to wait for my mom to get better. I would go to Oliver to explain. I didn't expect this wait to be 4 years. My mom still keeps nagging. I couldn't listen to it anymore. I took a bag of garbage and went out to get some air. I just threw the garbage into the trash can. I saw Oliver standing not far away. He was looking at me coldly. I don't know how long he had been standing there. I hurriedly walked over, meeting his light frown. I opened my mouth, didn't say a word. Instead, my heart started to get nervous. He came here. Is he looking for me? Oliver gave me a look. His tone was cold. You looked over his shoulder. He didn't say his name, but I knew he meant Jackson. I nodded. The aura around Oliver got colder. He turned and walked away. I didn't do anything wrong, but inside I was a little weak, couldn't help but follow. When I reacted, already followed him to the park next to his home, looking at his cold back. I pretended to be calm and said, Jackson's shoulder was injured for me a few days ago. Of course I have to help him look at it. It was already late now. The night was as cool as water. The whole park has become quiet. Oliver is standing in front, hands in his pockets, calmly looking at me. His eyes gradually became cold. After a while, a sarcastic smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, but the eyes were fierce as if he wanted to kill. His voice was as cold as ice. Is that so? I stared at him blankly. His face looked like it was carved with a knife. Hard lines, handsome with a hint of coldness. Oliver's length is even more outstanding than before. Noticing my straight stare, Oliver glanced at me. The sneer at the corner of his mouth became more obvious. I stammered to open my mouth. I wanted to ease the awkward atmosphere. Oliver, haven't seen you in years. I don't know how you are doing. I didn't finish my sentence. He interrupted coldly. How am I doing? It's none of your business. After hearing his words, I froze in place, feet touching feet. I didn't know what to do. Oliver didn't stay long, turned around and walked towards the inside of the park. I pursed my lips, immediately followed. I was a little confused as to what Oliver was thinking. If he hated me, why not just walk away and let me follow him? I was thinking about this. Oliver suddenly stopped. I wasn't paying attention. My forehead hit his back. That's when I smelled the odor of alcohol on him. I was shocked. Oliver, are you drinking? He didn't say anything. Instead, he stepped in front of me. His tall figure covered my whole body. I took a step back. You just opened your mouth, just as he pulled me into his arms. Your lips were blocked without defense. His kiss was sharp and fierce, so hot that it seemed to swallow me up. The ambiguous atmosphere got thicker and thicker with the wine, until my neck suddenly hurt. Only then did I come to my senses at once. I gently pushed him. Oliver, what's wrong with you? He suddenly stopped moving. His head is still resting on my shoulder. He was breathing heavily after a while. He spoke. Emily, you're too good. I admit defeat. There was a deep sadness in his tone. I was about to ask what happened. His cell phone suddenly rang. I accidentally glanced at the screen. It says it's Sophia calling. Is that the girl who accompanied him to the reunion today? Oliver suddenly let go of me. Eyes regained their clarity. He quickly picked up the phone. Something seems to have happened on the other end of the line. The girl's voice carried a sobbing tone. Oliver frowned after listening to her words, turned his head to look at me, whispered into the phone, "Okay, I'll be right there, you wait for me." His tone was gentle. It was completely different from the cold attitude he had just shown me. I froze in place, watching him walk away. My heart was empty. When I returned home, I found Jackson standing in front of my house. I quickly walked over and asked, "Why are you here again?" Jackson looked at me for a while, then said, "I forgot my keys at your house. I came to get it." "Oh, I'm sorry," I answered in a small voice. My mind was still recalling the phone call just now, Oliver's suddenly gentle tone. I wasn't sure what their relationship was, thinking too intently. Only when I came back to my senses did I realize that I had walked to the door of the flat. Head almost hit it. Luckily, Jackson reacted quickly. He pulled me back. I couldn't stand still. I wrapped my arms around his waist. I could hear his heavy breathing. Through the thin clothes, his body heat reached me. I was so scared that I immediately let go. Jackson looked at me with a smirk. "What's going on? So embarrassed. Haven't you ever touched a boy before?" I immediately retorted, "Don't be ridiculous. Oliver and I have been in love since our sophomore year." Just after I said that, all of a sudden there was silence around us. Jackson gave me a look. He let out a small O. He didn't say another word. He didn't say a word after that. I felt like he was a little upset. I turned my head to look at him. He was staring me dead in the neck. I asked him, "What's wrong with my neck?" He looked down at me with his eyes flickering after a moment. He said calmly, "What's wrong?" After I finished my shower, I realized why Jackson was always staring at my neck. There's a big red mark there. Oliver made it last night. I lay down on the bed, rolled over. In my head, I couldn't stop thinking about what the hell Oliver meant by those words. How could he have lost? I was just thinking. Jackson sent a WeChat. There was also a WeChat business card attached. "This is Jackson's WeChat. From now on, you and he will work on the company's cooperation projects. You're welcome." My eyes warmed up, immediately sat up straight, understanding that this is Jackson giving me the opportunity to have more contact with him. He immediately sent a big red envelope over. "Brother, thanks." Jackson didn't refuse. He accepted the red packet. He also introduced me to the key points of project cooperation. After the call, more than an hour had passed. I opened the business card with shaking hands, entered it was me in the verification message. I had thought Oliver would be asleep by this time. I didn't expect him to quickly approve my friend request. I opened the chat box. I wanted to ask him why he kissed me earlier. I wanted to ask him who the girl on the phone was. I also wanted to ask him what he meant by that last sentence. But on second thought, who am I to ask these things? My finger scratched around on the screen. In the end, nothing was sent. Oliver never sent me a message. I turned off my cell phone a little disappointed, lay back down on the bed. The next morning, I had just arrived at work. Jackson winked at me. "Oliver is waiting for you in the conference room." I rushed to the conference room. I pushed open the door. I saw Oliver standing by the window. He was standing tall, like bamboo and plum blossom. He has a fresh and unassuming demeanor. I walked up to him, was about to talk to him. I didn't expect him to speak first. "About last night, I'm sorry, I'm a little embarrassed." "It's okay, you drank too much yesterday." Oliver paused for a moment. He said in a slightly mocking tone, "I don't think I was drunk." "Why did you kiss me if you weren't drunk?" I was eager to know why. I asked him directly. Oliver replied coldly, "Emily, we ended it." I didn't expect him to say that. There was no room for negotiation. I feel bad. I asked with difficulty, "Is it because of the girl you went to the reunion with yesterday? Are you really married?" Oliver paused for a moment. Then he answered, "No, I'm not. I'm not married." I took a deep breath, feeling a whole lot more relaxed. I was about to ask something else. Oliver suddenly changed the subject. "Did Jackson mention the program to you yesterday?" I froze for a moment. I didn't expect him to talk to me about work at this time. I still answered honestly. "He talked to me last night. We stayed up late discussing it, then slept together." The words just fell. There was a momentary silence around me. I also noticed that what I just said was a bit easy to misunderstand. Was about to open my mouth to explain. At this moment, Oliver suddenly turned around and left. He left in a hurry and quickly, only leaving me with a cold back. It didn't take long. Jackson pushed the door and walked in. He looked at me with a smile on his face. "What did you guys just talk about? People were all pissed off by you. You didn't see him. His face was as black as charcoal when he left the house." I explained to him with an aggravated look on my face. He seemed to have misunderstood our relationship. "There is no misunderstanding. It's the truth." Jackson looked outside. He said with a hint of something, "Emily, I've always liked you. You should know that. My family's good, and my looks are not bad either. Will you be my girlfriend?" I looked at him blankly. I didn't understand why he was suddenly like this. Just when I was dumbfounded, Jackson took my hand. He asked, "Emily, will you give me a chance?" He bent down a little. The gesture was humble, but there's a hint of a joke in his eyes. I was about to ask him what happened today. A coworker's voice suddenly came from the doorway. "Oliver, why don't you go in?" I turned my head to look. Oliver was standing at the door. Oliver stood in the doorway, looking at us coldly. I immediately felt a chill down my back. I instinctively walked towards him, intending to explain seriously. Oliver, he glanced at me coldly, didn't say a word, turned away with 2 cups of coffee in his hand. Fool, why don't you go after him? I immediately came back to my senses. What about work? Jackson pushed me. You go, I'm here. I expected Oliver to drive off immediately. Instead, he sat in the car without moving. I tried pulling open the door and getting in. Before I could sit down, the car sped off. I looked out the window at the rapidly sweeping street scene, opened my mouth and asked, "Where are we going?" Oliver didn't say anything, nor did he look back. The car drove for half an hour before stopping. It stopped in an upscale neighborhood. I asked again, "Where is this?" Oliver gave me a faint look. He said, "My house." My eyes widened, surprised. "You bought a house in Chicago. When did that happen?" "How come I didn't know? You didn't care about me all these years." "Of course I didn't." Oliver's voice was calm, but there seems to be a hint of resignation in his tone. I look up at him. He had already turned his head, walking towards the neighborhood. Seeing that I didn't follow, he turned back and impatiently urged me. "Aren't you coming? I'm coming. I'll be right there," I answered, walked quickly. Oliver's home was spacious. The decor was just what I wanted after the reunion. There were quite a few misunderstandings between us. I intend to clear the air with him today. I was about to open my mouth, but my stomach growled indisputably. Oliver stared at me with a smirking expression on his face. "It's only a few o'clock now, and you're feeling hungry." I touched my stomach a little awkwardly. I didn't eat in the morning, so Oliver stopped for a moment, putting his jacket back on. "Then you wait for a while. I'll go buy food." I was about to say don't bother. He had already closed the door and left. The room was quiet for a moment. I was about to go to the bathroom to wash my hands. As soon as I entered the door, I smelled a familiar odor. I picked it up and took a look. Sure enough, it was the same brand we used to use in college. I didn't realize Oliver was still using it now. The familiar odor hit my nose. My throat was sore. In order to ease the sourness in my heart, I casually took a drink from the refrigerator, drinking it all in one gulp. Actually, 2 years ago, after my mom's condition improved, I went to see Oliver quietly. At that time, he was still in New York. I waited for him to get off work in front of his company. I saw him walking side by side with a girl. She was very pretty. She was a good match for Oliver. Oliver was smiling happily. I was a bit sad, but I was also glad that he finally got over his past. So I decided not to contact him anymore. Memories of the past. My heart became more and more empty. My head is getting dizzy. What's going on? Can I get drunk even when I'm sad? In a daze, I heard the door open, suddenly. I felt a chill on my forehead. "Why are you drinking?" His tone was still cold, but it was a lot milder than before. Hearing this familiar voice, I couldn't help it at once. I grabbed his hand tightly. With a crying voice, I said, "Oliver, I really regret it." He held my hand. His eyes looked straight at me, asked, "I'm sorry. Why you never came to me?" I immediately returned to him. "I obviously looked. I went to see you 2 years ago. You came out of the office with a girl. You were smiling happily. I thought you had a girlfriend." Oliver frowned, thought hard for a while, then sighed and said, "The girl you saw is my cousin." But at this moment, my mind was confused, completely unable to hear what he was saying. Heart like a big hand tightly grasped. I wanted to find an outlet to vent my anger, subconsciously blurted out. "I didn't send those text messages. It was my mom. She's against us being together. She's depressed. She won't make it without me." I hugged him tightly, like a man in the water grabbing for a lifeline. "I don't want to be separated from you again. My mom is cured. I'll look for you at the reunion right away. But you already have a fiancé." I looked at him. "Oliver, did we miss it again?" I could clearly feel his body suddenly stiffen. "Oliver, I'm so sorry. I've been thinking about you all these years. Can you come back to me, suddenly?" Oliver kissed me tightly. His eyes were lowered. His eyes were complicated and hard to recognize. He whispered, "Emily, that's what you said. I won't let you go again." With tears in my eyes, I gently touched the tip of my tongue to his. He kissed me deeper. When I woke up, it was already dark. There was no one around me. I rubbed my sore back, thinking back on what had just happened. Where did Oliver go? I walked out of the room, noticed he left a sticky note on the fridge, said there was something waiting for him at the company. "We'll bring back a late-night snack later." I smiled and tore off the sticky note. At this time, Jackson suddenly sent a message asking if I was going back to work. I replied, "I'm at Oliver's now. I'm not going today. It took a while for the other side to reply. Okay, I fought back the aches and pains in my body. I went into the bathroom and took a shower. Then I went back to the room to tidy up the messy bed. When tidying up the bed sheets, I suddenly froze. Because there was actually a pair of black women's stockings underneath the sheets. I tidied up the room in my heart. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Wait for Oliver to come back and hear what he has to say. But I waited for a long time. Oliver still didn't come back. Just then, there was a sudden sound at the door. I looked up and looked that way. Good, I'm home. I'll wait for you to come back. There was a beautiful woman standing at the door. She bent down, skillfully took out slippers from the shoe cabinet and changed into them. The moment I saw her face, my heart skipped a beat. She was the girl who was with Oliver that day at the reunion. Sophia, Emily. She actually remembered my name. I was a little bit weak. I asked in a low voice, "What are you doing here?" She was organizing her clothes on the couch. "I'm here to help Oliver with his laundry." I came to help Oliver with the laundry. She gave me a casual look, lightly raised an eyebrow. "You guys have been together before." Her tone was casual, but I squirmed a little inside. Didn't answer her question, asked her instead, "What is your relationship with him?" She gave me a surprised look. "Didn't Oliver tell you? I'm her fiancé. We're getting married next month." I frowned, wanted to ask something more, but she waved her hand, goes straight to the bathroom, started washing clothes. When she came out, in her hand was an extra pair of stockings. Oh, she accidentally left them behind last time, seeing me looking at her. She smiled. "You know why Oliver brought you back?" "Why?" She raised her eyebrows and looked at me. "Why else? Just to embarrass you. You two had such a bad breakup back then. He's always hated you. He's always wanted to get back at you. It's good for you two to meet, so he can let go of the past. He'll forget about you, and he can live with me in peace." She handed me a wedding invitation. She said, "Emily wants you to come to our wedding, but Oliver might not want you to." I stared blankly. I was a little confused until she left. I still didn't come back to my senses. I dried the sheets and left on the way back. Oliver sent a lot of tweets, called several times. I didn't answer. My heart was so full, like a ball of cotton, I couldn't breathe. Oliver has always been a man of principle. He took her to the reunion that day, and today, she came into his house familiarly. She washed his clothes for him. If that woman is looking for trouble on purpose, what about the stockings on the bed? I put on my shoes and prepared to leave, but I was still reluctant. What if there really is a misunderstanding? We've been tossing and turning for so long. We were so close to being together. Because of this little thing, we missed it. I'm really not happy about it. After waiting for more than an hour, Oliver finally came back. He looks a bit hasty. He also carried 2 boxes of soup dumplings in his hand. He looked at me with a smile. "Emily, this is the soup dumplings in front of the school. You used to love them. I was passing by today. I bought them on the way." That's nonsense. His company is in the south. The school is in the north. It's an hour's drive. It's not like he's on his way. The dumplings are still hot. He must have driven very fast. The tears I've been holding back for a long time finally fell. Oliver saw me crying. He immediately hugged me. He asked, "Emily, what's wrong with you? Who bullied you? Who else? It's your fiancé." I got a little angry. I pushed him. He didn't let go. Instead, he hugged me tighter. He said to me jokingly, "You're the one who broke up with me in the first place. You were the one who regretted it later. Now, even between us is also your initiative. Do you not want to be responsible for it?" The voice sounds relaxed, but with a hint of tension. "Not I do not want to be responsible. Aren't you getting married soon?" I choked and said. He looked at me with a surprised look on his face. "Who said I was getting married?" I immediately took out that video from earlier and showed it to him. He looked at me, smiled, and gently nodded my head. "I realize that you are not only timid, you're also particularly naive. You believe whatever others say. That's actually my cousin's wedding venue. She's getting married next week." I was caught off guard by this reversal. I sniffled. "It's true. Of course it's true." I stared at him blankly, heart beating so fast it felt like it was going to pop out. What was with the stockings in that room? He frowned, looked over at me. "What stockings?" I sobbed as I told him about that day. Oliver frowns, said, "I think someone snuck into my house." He took out his cell phone surveillance and showed me. He soon found a suspicious figure from a month ago. That person was Sophia. She secretly opened the door. She opened the door, took her stockings out of her bag, and went into the bedroom. Then she went into the bedroom. He watched coldly. His eyes sharpened. "She's the daughter of one of our partners. Once I asked her to pick up something from my house. It was probably that time she secretly matched the key to our house. This woman is so uncomfortable. Actually put her socks on my bed. I responded with a whispered "oh." I went on. Jackson and I don't really have anything, he said. I know. Oliver gave a look of understanding. He already told me. I've been the only thing on your mind all these years. I punched him in anger. Oliver immediately grabbed my hand. So now can you be with me again? I blushed, looked at him, nodded, finished eating. It started to rain heavily outside. The sound of rain seemed particularly ambiguous in the small space. The car slowly stopped in front of my house. I just bit my lip and prepared to get out of the car. Suddenly, Oliver pulled me back. He leaned over at once. He kissed me on the mouth, gentle lips, warm tongue, fresh breath, sliding gently over my teeth, flowing into my mouth. A week later, Oliver took me to her cousin's wedding. After the wedding, her cousin left me to talk. She held my hand. Grateful sister-in-law, thank you for being with my brother. I was a bit embarrassed, blushed, said, I also want to thank your brother for wanting to be with me. I think it's the best arrangement. My cousin looked at me seriously. Actually, my cousin has always liked you and has been waiting for you in these 4 years. He's been single, never had a relationship. I've moved my business from New York to Chicago for you. I moved all my business from New York to Chicago. Sister-in-law, I understand it's not easy for you. I hope you'll always be happy in these 4 years. I'm not the only one who's had a hard time. It turns out that he is also in love and hate ups and downs. I hold her hand tightly and said, good, we will definitely be good in the future. I walked out the door. I saw Oliver waiting by the car. I immediately jumped into his arms. I said to him, Oliver, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you wait for so many years. Oliver stared at me. He was breathing heavily. Then you should make it up to me. Come to my house tonight. My face instantly turned red, burying my head in his arms. Nodded lightly. Jackson Extra, Emily and Oliver's wedding day. A friend asked me, did you regret giving up the girl you love? Do you regret it? How could I not regret it? In fact, she's the one I've always liked. The first time I saw her, she looked quite fragile, but after spending time together, one realizes that she's actually very strong inside. I was gradually attracted to her. I tried my best to help her, slowly. I felt that there was something different between her and me. She often looked at me inexplicably, and blush, and would secretly pay attention to me. Every time she looked at me shyly, I get a special feeling in my heart. It's very satisfying. I understood my own feelings a long time ago, and liked her a lot. I plan to confess my love to her as soon as I graduate from high school. Then we'll go to college together, and get married after graduation. But all this was disrupted by that incident. I got up in the middle of the night to drink water. I heard my parents arguing. I was going to go and talk things out. But as soon as I heard Emily's father's name, the whole thing froze. It turns out that my dad's company and Emily's family's company have always been competitors. In order to bring down Emily's family, found a young girl to get close to Emily's dad. She stole important documents from the company. As a result, Emily's family went bankrupt. Emily was in trouble too, so when Emily confessed her love to me, I refused without hesitation. I didn't have the face to see her again, and even more embarrassed to accept her feelings. I don't dare to think how much she would hate me if she knew the truth. I really wanted to say yes, but I couldn't. In the end, I had to find a far-fetched excuse. I left that place. I heard she went to New York for college, and she has a nice boyfriend. I was worried. I went to look for her. I found that Oliver is quite reliable. He's worth committing to for life. Seeing her smiling so happily beside him, I was a bit uncomfortable, but I felt more at ease. This is good. Finally, someone can be by her side to take care of her.